Hello gamers, it's Gold Demon here, back with another HSR video. Today I'm returning back to my roots that many of you have joined the channel for, and I'm doing a pre-release analysis for the upcoming character, CIPHER. CIPHER is a quantum nihility unit who specializes in damage amplification and being a secondary DPS, similar to units like Tribi. Her main thing is storing a portion of the damage dealt to the enemies and keeping it as true damage to use for ultimate for massive nuke damage. And if built right, will pair with many of the top DPS, as well as helping lower investment setups and promoting sustainless setups. Her strong universal amplification with permanent uptime in all fights will make her a great pickup for many accounts. CIPHER works effectively in multiple teams and setups and can function even as a main damage dealer in some cases. Granted, it will require significant investment and dupes. And like I said, due to her weakened debuff, she's one of the best enablers of sustainless teams. So let's get into it. To quickly go over her stats, her HP is on the lower end of things, as well as her attack is on the lower end of damage dealers, unfortunately, with her defense also being pretty low. The one exception being her speed is actually 106. This is going to be important for building her, as she's going to want a lot of speed. For a trace priority, you're going to focus on the skill, followed by the talent ultimate, and lastly the basic attack. So, onto her talent, the Hospitable Delusion. When there are no enemy targets in patron state on the battlefield, CIPHER immediately causes the enemy target with the highest HP on the battlefield to become the patron. When using the skill and the ultimate, the primary target becomes the patron. The patron state only takes effect on the latest target. After the patron is attacked by other allied targets, CIPHER immediately launches a follow-up attack against the patron, dealing quantum damage equal to 150% of CIPHER's attack. This effect can be triggered up to one time each turn, and it resets the start of CIPHER's turn. CIPHER will record 12% of the non-true damage allied targets deal to patron, but the overflow damage will not be recorded. The recorded value is cleared after using ultimate. This talent works just like Topaz's talent, where Numby will retarget the enemy whenever you reuse Topaz's skill. So just like that, CIPHER also has a unique mark on the enemy target. Additionally, CIPHER has her follow-up attack that will happen once per turn. And then lastly, the most important part is that CIPHER will record 12% of the non-true damage to allied targets. The thing that's important to specify here is that it is non-true damage, meaning that it will not include damage added on top of by the MC or Tribi E1. So unfortunately, there is a bit of anti-synergy there with the fact that those two characters do not add to CIPHER's count, but it's nothing to really worry about. Also, that part about it not being overflow damage, this means any damage that is more than the enemy's HP pool will not be counted by CIPHER. So if you're using Phase Shao, for example, and your Phase Shao does more damage than the enemy's health bar, only the damage that is actually dealt to the enemy will count, none of the overcap damage. Now, while 12% of your damage dealt sounds small, she has ways of actually increasing the amount of the damage recorded. And it is important that both the skill and ultimate retarget, as you're going to want to primarily target the elite enemies that have enemies next to them. This will be expanded on later. And lastly, for it being cleared by the ultimate, that is this character's entire thing, recording damage and releasing it via the ultimate in one massive nuke. It is worth mentioning though that this damage number is uncapped, so you can stack it as much as you want and then use the ultimate whenever you want, even upwards of 40 plus million like in the event. I know, it's crazy stuff. The fact that her talent is uncapped can lead to some pretty interesting scenarios, or even zero cycle scenarios, where she's able to completely one-shot enemies, or even bypass enemy mechanics, like damage reduction, since it is true damage. And because it's true damage, it will ignore, of course, other enemy effects. And with that being said, onto her ultimate. Yours truly, Kitty Phantom Thief. Deals quantum damage equal to 120% of CIPHER's attack at level 10 to one designated enemy. Then deals true damage equal to 25% of the currently recorded talent to that one designated enemy. Quantum damage equal to 40% of CIPHER's attack to one designated enemy and its adjacent targets, and true damage equal to 75% of the current talent's recorded value. This true damage is distributed to all skill targets. Basically, her ultimate is going to hit one target primarily for a big chunk of single target damage and do an additional 25% of the true damage that CIPHER has stored. After that, it will hit all three targets targeted by the skill for 40% of her attack, dealing quantum damage, and then it will split 75% of the remaining recorded true damage amongst them evenly. So in a 3-target scenario, it will be 25, 25, and 25. If it's in a single target scenario, full 75% will go to that one target. It's important to know and make sure you're targeting the right target so you don't waste your true damage, as like many other characters, you could have some of your damage wasted by it attacking the wrong target, or if the enemy is already about to die, then some of your true damage is going to be wasted on that enemy. Now onto her skill, because this is also important to her kit. So her skill, a jackpot for the taking. There's a 20% chance to weaken the enemy target and adjacent targets, decreasing their damage dealt by 10% and increasing CIPHER's attack by 30%, lasting for 2 turns. At the same time, deals quantum damage equal to 200% of CIPHER's attack to one designated enemy, and quantum damage equal to 100% of CIPHER's attack to adjacent targets. First skill has the rare ability of Weaken, which hasn't been seen at any units besides Natasha since 1.0, so it's been 2 years since Hoyoverse has done anything with Weaken. This is pretty interesting, as this is a direct 10% reduction in the enemy's damage dealt to you. This is a very powerful ability that can make your sustains have an easier time protecting the team, and generally just help in sustainless comps. That you can probably tell now CIPHER is really good at doing. Since she records a portion of the damage you do, and can weaken the targets, this makes her great for those specific teams. And also, because she reduces the damage dealt, this can help people if they have lower investment setups on their sustains or other characters so that you don't die as often. And her basic attack is just a basic attack. As for her technique, Puss in Boots obtains Zagreus Blessing for 15 seconds. During this time, CIPHER will be undetectable by enemies and her movement speed will increase by 50%. When approaching an enemy in Overworld, Simulated Universe, Divergent Universe, there will be a chance of immediately obtaining a random consumable. You can obtain consumables up to 50 times each day. When entering battle with Zagreus Blessing, active deals quantum damage equal to 100% of CIPHER's attack to all enemies, and increases the recorded damage from CIPHER obtains from this instance of damage by 200%. This technique isn't all that special, but it does give you a nice movement boost in the overworld, just like Fei Xiao's does. Now onto her traces. Her A2 trace, Empyrean Strides, whenever CIPHER speed is greater to or equal to 140 or 170, increases her crit rate by 25% or 50%, and recorded value by 50% or 100%. This is going to be her most important trace, as this not only gives her a nice chunk of crit rate to make building her easier and increase her damage, but also will double your recorded value, taking that 12% to 24%. This is a pretty good trace, and it shows you clearly how you're supposed to build this unit. A lot of speed. For A4 trace 300, CIPHER will record 8% of the non-true damage from allied targets dealt to the enemy's targets alongside the patron. Overflow damage is not recorded. So, just like her talent, this is another way of her recording true damage. However, it's going to be for the 2 adjacent targets of the main target. This will also be boosted by her previous trace, so that it will be 16% of the true damage dealt to those targets, meaning she now can record, if you combine all the numbers together, 56% of the damage dealt. Now, of course, this isn't exactly 56%, it's 16, 24, and 16, but it's still worth noting that she does get extra damage recorded in a blast target scenario. As for her A6 trace, Sleight of the Sky, increases the crit damage dealt by talent follow-up attack by 100%. When CIPHER is on the battlefield, damage received by all enemy targets increases by 40%. This is an insane trace that effectively makes her a permanent Xiao Chou with a slightly reduced amplification. Kind of like Tribi in the same way. This trace is very powerful, that she simply buffs everybody's damage simply for being on the field. This is massive for all kinds of characters, like, of course, Acheron, for example, or even Fei Xiao. And because of the way she functions with recording true damage and increasing the damage of everybody, that makes her great with characters like Hyacinth and Aventurine, who are sustains that will also be contributing to her build-up damage. This trace is key to why CIPHER is so powerful. Her minor traces are speed, quantum damage, and effect hit rate, giving you a bonus of 14 speed, 14.4% quantum damage, and 10% effect hit rate. This effect hit rate might seem useless, but it is actually important, that she's going to need 39% about effect hit rate to guarantee debuff application for not only her light cone, but her weaken effect. And then the speed will help you build towards that 170 plus speed threshold that you'll be trying to hit. Now onto her Eidolons. CIPHER has some pretty powerful Eidolons that you might want to consider getting, especially given that you may be an Acheron fan, or even a Fei Xiao fan, or want her to synergize with potential future units. Starting with her Eidolon 1, CIPHER's recorded damage is 150% of the original recorded damage value. When using the follow-up attack caused by her talent, increases CIPHER's attack by 80% for 2 turns. This is a very nice increase in her personal damage, giving you 80% attack bonus, can be pretty nice, as well as the fact that she will be giving herself an additional 50% increase in your recorded true damage. This will take your already recorded true damage and of course increase it by 50%, making that primary target from 24 to 30 and the adjacent targets from 16 to 20. It's a pretty nice increase for your overall damage, not only for CIPHER, but also the fact that she'll keep more of the damage dealt by the team. Eidolon 2. When CIPHER hits an enemy target, there's a 120% base chance for them to receive 30% more damage lasting for 2 turns. This is a very powerful Eidolon, taking her damage amplification from a raw 40% to a raw 70%. This is matching the likes of Xiao Chou, while the fact that she can also do damage. Very powerful Eidolon that makes her just that much better. As for her Eidolon 4, which typically Eidolon Force aren't too strong, this one is actually pretty decent. So after the patron is attacked by an allied target, CIPHER deals quantum damage and additional damage equal to 50% of her attack. So whenever the enemy gets hit, she will also do an additional stack of damage. This of course will add up a lot if you can hit the same target a lot, and can actually be a pretty decent increase in damage. Lastly, for Eidolon 6, you're going to get a massive increase in your follow-up damage by 350%, and she'll record an additional 16% of the non-overflow damage dealt by this attack, meaning the talent in itself by this point will increase upwards of 50+% for the singular target, a massive increase there for her damage. Additionally, the E6 will keep 20% of the true damage you deal. So let's say you stack up to 1 million true damage with her at E6, she will keep 200,000 of that damage. This is a massive increase to her overall damage and just makes her that much better. So time to talk about what is probably the biggest factor in the power of CIPHER as a unit, her light cone. Her light cone is absolutely insane. Her light cone gives her a massive increase in speed by 18%, and additionally has a 120% chance to reduce enemies' defense by 16%. And if you have higher than 170 speed, you'll get another 20% chance to increase that defense reduction by 8%, meaning you get a total of 24 defense down. Lastly, whenever they are in one of the two states applied by the light cone, if the effect is reapplied, only the latest one will be active. Meaning, unfortunately, like most Nihility light cones, these effects cannot be stacked. This light cone is pretty much just a direct upgrade over Pearls, that of which would at R5 increase it by 16%, but only have a 100% base chance, meaning you need to build more effective rate to get. CIPHER's light cone is immensely powerful for what it's doing, given that it gives you a huge chunk of speed and 24% defense down. This isn't directly comparable to someone like Jiao Cho's, which is giving you 24% damage taken, but this does stack very well with other characters like Silverwolf, given that if you do actually put CIPHER's light cone on Silverwolf and are able to hit the requirements, this becomes Silverwolf's new best in slot for amplifying damage, taking Silverwolf from standalone amplifying upwards of 70% of your damage, all the way up to a 92% increase in your main character's damage. This light cone on other characters that are not CIPHER is very, very powerful, and on CIPHER herself, it is very powerful for generating stacks for Acheron and overall increasing your damage. This light cone takes CIPHER's damage amplification from 40% to 60% overall, a massive increase. Of course, as you may know, with defense down, the more of it you stack, the better it gets. So this light cone can go very well alongside other characters that already have built-in defense penetration or defense down, or other light cones that also have defense down, like Pearls, for example, if you were to stack this on another Nihility character besides CIPHER. And for further on the comparisons, if we take a look at Fuchs light cone is going to increase the break damage dealt at a target, which can stack up to 2 times, but once again, Fuchs is another character that builds speed, and so giving Fugue an additional increase in defense down from her already 16% defense down can also be very nice for your break damage. Same thing goes for Black Swan. Black Swan's light cone, it does a similar effect. However, it gives effect hit rate, and per stack that you have of dot, it will increase your attack and defense down. However, Black Swan's is only for herself. CIPHER's is for the entire team. Once again, another character, kind of like how Black Swan could have used Jiao Cho's light cone for a dot damage increase, you can similarly use CIPHER's light cone on Black Swan for another team damage increase. This light cone additionally, even though it's not recommended, can be used on Acheron. Given that it applies a debuff, this means Acheron, just like her own signature light cone, will get a stack for whenever you use this light cone on an enemy, and so on and so on. You can see that this light cone is quite versatile and very powerful at that. Since it gives such a massive increase of speed and it's effectively an upgraded version of Pearls, it works on pretty much any Nihility character that you could want it to. And that's where there's kind of a dilemma. CIPHER's light cone is so powerful, it might even need a dedicated video to itself. And it is the entire reason why she's going to be so good with characters like Acheron. You do really want to pull the light cone. It's not necessary to pull a light cone to get the most out of CIPHER, but I would highly recommend it, as it is probably the biggest deciding factor between her and her alternatives in the Acheron team, such as Silverwolf, Jiao Cho, and so on. Same thing applies for if you want to use CIPHER with somebody like My Day or Fei Zhao. The light cone is going to be one of the big deciding factors on how strong CIPHER will be for those characters, which I know to some of you may be unfortunate, but that just is how it is. This light cone is very strong in what it's actually doing. Of course, alternatively, like I've been saying, you could use Pearls, or if you want to go a more damage-focused CIPHER, something like Goodnight Sleep Well or even Acheron Signature will work very well. And before you ask, no, you cannot use Boundless Cherto unless you somehow get a external source of defense down, because CIPHER baseline does not have any defense down. So this light cone, even though it looks pretty, will not be usable on CIPHER by herself. And while CIPHER may need a bit of effect hit rate, as we move over to builds, I would like to give an honorable mention to Tutorial. Tutorial is a light cone that many people like to use and are hoping to use it on CIPHER. However, this is not something I can really recommend, and while she does need the effect hit rate, this thing is going to be a bit overkill, as well as the fact that you can just generally get more out of running other light cones such as pearls. Additionally, again, unless you have an external source of defense down, she cannot make use of the extra energy. And even if you were to make use of the extra energy, in my opinion, it's not really needed, as CIPHER default already has a good enough ER rotation. And typically with CIPHER, you're going to hold onto the ultimate to when you need to use it for damage instead of spamming it as much as possible. So, as for how to build her, I'm only going to recommend 3 options really on how to build CIPHER, as the other options aren't really that worthwhile with how you want to build this character. Her best option, in my opinion, is going to be 4-piece Dead Waters. The reason for this is that it's going to be her biggest increase in damage, from the fact it's going to give her upwards of 24% crit damage, which she can pretty easily hit as long as you have 1 extra debuff on the enemy, but it's also going to give you extra crit rate just to top you off that much more. And because of this, it allows you to easily build for speed substats that she's going to want. You can, of course, because she's Quantum, use 4-piece Quantum set. This is going to be a decent option on her. However, its performance may vary whether or not you have one of the defense reduction light cones on her or not. Other than that, though, it's generally not going to perform as well as 4-piece Dead Waters due to how crit scaling. And then lastly, the other option, if you can't get a good 4-piece of the other 2, is going to be a 2-piece speed. This is going to be your more flexible option, and or if you're trying to just simply gear her and use her day 1, if you don't have a 4-piece Dead Waters ready to go, this is going to be a solid option to help you get those speed thresholds that you're going to need on this character, at the cost of some damage. As for planars, you have quite the variety of options. It's going to depend on how you're building CIPHER, whether you're going for a more support focus or a damage focus. I'm going to recommend a more support focused CIPHER, so it's probably going to be one of these options, which is going to be Seize, Ageless, or Von Whack. Von Whack isn't really all that useful. It's only to really try to get her an extra turn if you have a lower amount of speed. I wouldn't really recommend this. It's more of just a filler option. Aegis is going to be an okay option. It's going to increase the attack of all your teammates, which is going to help her damage just a little bit and help, let's say, Acheron's a little bit as well. Lastly, you do have Sunken Seas, which is typically going to be her best, as this 5% ER does change her energy rotation, allowing you to go from a 5-turn ult rotation to a 4-turn ult rotation, depending on the number of skills you use, as well as give the unit in slot 1 a nice 12% attack bonus. It is unfortunate that we don't have any planars that are ideally made for a support character like this, or debuffers in general, but we can only hope for the future. And if you do want a more damage-focused CIPHER, Salcedo, Durin, and Azumo or Glamoth are all viable options depending on what team you want to use her in. The best for damage will be Durin if you can actually build it up fast enough. Otherwise, Salcedo is a solid enough option. And Azumo if you are only going to use her in Acheron teams. For stats, I'm going to recommend a crit damage body. You can do effect hit rate body if you don't have enough subs and you don't really care so much for her damage, more her support capabilities. For boots, always do speed. There is zero reason to do anything else besides speed. For the orb, you can do attack percent if you want. However, I will recommend quantum damage, as this will be the best for maximizing her personal damage. And then for the rope, attack percent again. You can alternatively use energy recharge if you do want to get more ultimates off. However, there is no real reason to do this, and it also lowers her personal damage output, which means you get less stack buildup. And as for the stats we're trying to hit, I'm going to recommend a minimum of 170 speed, as this is going to be maxing out her true damage capabilities. And I would highly recommend trying to push for that 200.1 speed threshold. This will allow her to get 3 turn cycle 0 without any additional action advance from any other units, and this is going to be how you maximize your stat gain for Acheron teams and Fei Xiao teams that really want the number of actions. Additionally, if you do want to make sure she has 100% application for said teams, you're going to need 38.9% effective rate, making her requirements pretty tough to get overall, considering that you are also going to want to build crit damage and crit rate on her. If anything, I'd recommend at the very least dropping the effect hit rate to favor in speed and crit, as her damage is going to be the highlight, as well as getting those extra actions, because you're better off getting that extra turn for another chance to proc versus, that 1% chance that you would miss the proc from not having enough effect hit rate. So to talk about teams' noble synergies, it's going to depend on whoever your main DPS is. Typically, hypercarry comps aren't going to want CIPHER, as they primarily right now run Sunday Robin as a core duo, especially given that you have Sunday's Light Cone, as he enables you to spend whatever SP you want, alongside Robin, who is SP negative. And because Robin gives so much attack, those characters generally have their buffers covered. So where does it leave CIPHER? Well, basically everywhere else. And for the most part, the same comps as characters like Tribby. See, CIPHER occupies a similar niche to Jiao and Tribby, where they are AoE buffers that have some unique mechanic added to them that make them better in specific teams. One of the things that makes Tribby so good is the fact that she gives a massive increase in your damage, giving you not only 30% damage taken, but also another 24% element penetration. This, on paper, is a much larger increase than CIPHER, and not to mention that Tribby also does follow-ups and damage. However, the difference is here that CIPHER is going to, of course, record a percentage of your damage dealt, meaning that overall, the damage dealt from CIPHER can actually outpace that of Tribby. But for the very same reasons as I mentioned that Robin Sunday is such a strong core, if you do a comp that is, let's say, CIPHER Robin, this can also be a massive damage increase, as this is a true 40% on top of all the Robin buffing that you're getting. So in a scenario where, let's say you were running Robin in the team and you had an open slot, CIPHER would fit great there. But why do I mention these supports? Well, the main reason is because these supports do damage. Both Tribby and Robin do damage on the side, as well as their supportive functionality, which CIPHER will record a portion of this damage. That's why it's also important to mention the sustains in this. Sustains like Aventurine and Hyacinth both do damage alongside with your team. So this will also contribute to CIPHER's damage recording and make her even better. Of course, there's the primary team that people will most likely use CIPHER in, and that's going to be Acheron's team, as either a addition to Jiao or as a side trait to Jiao. The thing is with Jiao is that fundamentally at the end of the day, no matter what you do, he's still going to be Acheron's best in slot buffer. His true 50% alongside his Light Cone, which is going to give another 24%, is outpacing the damage amplification that even CIPHER brings with her Light Cone. And when you add them together, the amplification isn't even all that great. It's only going to be, given you have both Light Cones, upwards of 145% in comparison to where if you ran Jiao with the signature and Silver Wolf with CIPHER's Light Cone, it's going to be at 234%. Of course, this comparison ignores the fact that CIPHER is doing damage. It is worth mentioning that where CIPHER is going to excel is going to depend on what you have, and one of the primary deciding factors is going to be her Light Cone at the end of the day. As without her Light Cone, well, the increase falls off a pretty large amount. It's harder to build her, and at least in Acheron's case, you don't have as much uptime on stack. And the reason I mention this is that CIPHER standalone, let's say you do have her Light Cone, at 201 speed is going to be generating Acheron on average 6 stacks cycle 0, given that she is able to get all 3 of her turns. In comparison to Jiao baseline is getting, well, 6 stacks. That's not even including any extra actions or enemies being summoned on field. And this is the biggest comparison in a team for Acheron, is that despite the fact that the amplification may be way lower than, let's say, running Silverwolf on the team with CIPHER's own Light Cone, you're still going to get more stacks than Silverwolf. Silverwolf typically is only going to be able to get 3 stacks, and that's its, first cycle. In comparison, CIPHER can still get 6, matching Jiao's baseline. So even in the case that Silverwolf does provide more amplification than either of the 2 other Acheron supports, it's still going to be that over time, you're going to ult more and more, and that running someone like Jiao and CIPHER is still going to end up being a better setup in the long run because you get more overall ults. Now, of course, there's the argument to be made if you only need a certain number of ultimates, that of course Silverwolf can be better than one of the 2 in this case. But at that point, and of course you could just run Stainless, and in that case, you would be increasing your damage by 381% if you ran all 3 of these characters with Silverwolf on Pearls, and this would give you nearly 5 times the amount of damage. I bring this up because the scenario that CIPHER fills, or her niche, is pretty complex. Is that she's not exactly the best in slot in every team, but she does flex in pretty much every team. And I highlight the Acheron one as that is primarily the most popular reason that people are going to be playing this character, despite the fact that she still works in other great teams, like Fei Xiao. In comparison to the alternative, CIPHER typically performs better than Topaz because she's just doing more damage with her true damage stacking. See, while Topaz can and should be getting 1 to 2 more stacks than CIPHER per rotation, CIPHER is still going to be doing overall more damage while buffing, in a lot of cases, more than Topaz. And given the fact that CIPHER is more flexible than Topaz and isn't restricted to follow-up, this generally makes her better overall as an investment for the follow-up team. It is worth noting that this team in particular is subject to Aventurine RNG, but just know that in a lot of cases, that CIPHER generally performs better than even Topaz in her own niche. Additionally, CIPHER can work in teams such as Castorice. While obviously not better than Tribby, CIPHER is still providing a decent source of damage amplification and is going to record a certain percentage of your damage in Blast, which makes a great alternative to Tribby in that team. Of course, Tribby does have the advantage of having Dance Dance Dance, but it is worth noting that you can still use CIPHER in a comp such as Castorice and have it perform decently well. Same thing with the Herta. This is another team where Tribby excels and is going to be ideal for the Herta, but CIPHER, of course, due to the fact that she records a certain percentage of your true damage on Blast, is going to allow Herta to be just a little bit better in those 3-to-1 target scenarios. This is very great for her team, considering how you build it, with her Anaxa, who's also doing a similar thing to CIPHER by promoting Herta in 3-to-1 scenarios, as well as whatever sustain you bring along. Lastly, I think one of the notable ones is going to be Mayday. Mayday is in a similar scenario to where he typically runs a action advancer such as Sunday and then some AoE buffer. Well, CIPHER is arguably Mayday's best teammate. Considering Mayday has so much self-action advance and with the way he's ran, you want the enemies to attack him a lot. CIPHER, for one, yes, does lower the damage, which would lower the amount of stacks you get on Mayday. However, is going to still record a portion of the damage that Mayday does. And because Mayday's Blast, he's going to work great with CIPHER. Granted, he does have his auto target issues where he might not target the right target, but it's still worth noting that this can be a decent increase for your Mayday's damage while allowing you to build up an extra nuke in the background for Mayday while he does his thing normally. She's got a wide variety of characters that she can work with, and this makes her pretty valuable. And she's a great alternative to characters like Raw Mei, as to where maybe you don't need the extra speed from Raw Mei and could fill in for some more damage, such as running CIPHER, for example. CIPHER's position meta-wise is pretty complex considering how she functions, to the point where it probably needs a dedicated video. And that's why I'm going to cut this video here, as I feel like I probably need to make 2 or maybe even 3 more videos dedicated to CIPHER. So if you want to see that, make sure you like and comment that you want to see that, so I know to make that. Additionally, I want to make it clear that this video, throughout me explaining how she's functioning and teams and stuff, I'm not in any way saying that she's better than Tribby. My only argument that is she is possibly on par with Tribby, but it remains to be seen until we actually get her in game to sort of figure out all the intricacies of her kit. Additionally, right, the image that I show with the X's and the arrows are more of just my thoughts generally on how CIPHER's going to affect the meta, and so I'll briefly explain that as we end. So to quickly explain this image, the green circles are the teams and comps that CIPHER can possibly help. That being Aglia, this is primarily in her sustainless comp. CIPHER's going to be one of the best, if not the best option there. Castorice as an alternative to Tribby, obviously not going to be as powerful as Tribby, as Tribby's HP scaling is going to work better for Castorice in generating her dragon and giving it full charge. Mayday, as you've already heard my arguments, it's going to be similar to Tribby. However, at the same time, depending or not whether you can make use of Dance Dance Dance, one of Tribby's biggest benefits, obviously Tribby will take the lead in that scenario. Same thing with Herta. Herta would obviously prefer Tribby, given that you would want the Dance 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 100% in this team, but it just is an alternative, right, to Tribby if you do not have her, right? Once again, not saying to pull her over Tribby, just giving you an example of where she could be used. Same thing for Acheron. Acheron is going to get a great benefit from CIPHER. I need to test it whenever she comes out, but I would believe that CIPHER Jiao Chou is going to be Acheron's best team inside of Pure Fiction. It will depend on the lineup. Maybe somebody like Sparkle who's giving team action advance is still going to be better. I don't know. It really depends on what's going on. Anaxa is another example where if you aren't using Tribby in this case, or somebody else that's slot 3 character, could work really well. Obviously, he does benefit from having somebody like Ron May, right? But just as an example, CIPHER can work decently well here. Same thing with Boot Hill. Boot Hill is one of those characters who really only cares about getting break, doesn't care about too much. And so if you're running as a stainless comp, or if you just have Sunday and aren't running somebody like Robin, right, who, yes, arguably would be better for Boot Hill specifically, you could just run CIPHER and it would work as an alternative, right? You can see she's very flexible. Fei Xiao. Fei Xiao is basically just getting a straight upgrade in this regard for CIPHER, which is nice. And Dr. Ratio, because CIPHER has built-in debuffs, is pretty much better than Topaz, a baseline for Dr. Ratio as well. especially because it's not just follow-up damage, where a portion of his damage will be from the ultimate and skill, while smaller, still notable. And then lastly, the same thing applies for pure fiction reasons why like Mini Herta would work, and somebody like March 7th would also benefit in some regard, right? Depending on the setup, right? There's a bunch of possibilities, right? And while some of these characters aren't really as seen as favorably or as popular, it's still options that would work for CIPHER. And with this specifically, obviously this does diminish Topaz's value, as she's kind of getting replaced in most of where you would use her. Same thing with Jiao Cho. Jiao Cho's external value is basically been completely destroyed. Sustainless comps have basically entirely replaced him with somebody like CIPHER, which is, you know, cool for those who want it. And Pella is effectively getting completely invalidated with these upcoming patches. So yeah, that's basically why this image is like this. And the same thing applies for Ruan Mei, where Ruan Mei is going to get replaced in some comps with, in my opinion, CIPHER. But of course, this is just a pre-release analysis. This needs to be actually tested in game to see how it will function. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, me on Twitch, and I'll see you in the next one.